Thank you so much, Michael. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lee Airton, and I'm an assistant professor of gender and sexuality studies at Queen's in the Faculty of Education. It's really a pleasure for me to be here on day 3, as I was unable to join folks due to being on leave in the fall. And I just want to say, before I introduce my wonderful colleagues, I know this is not the Jean Fleiderer retirement celebration, but particularly given the theme of the conference and the series, I just want to acknowledge that the 25 years of service that Jean offered to our university, including, I believe, the first gender-neutral washrooms policy at a Canadian institution, at a university institution, that paved the way for me to thrive on campus at Queen's as the first non-binary faculty member here. So when I think about the work done by folks here, I think about the work done to make it a space for me to be in my role, and it's my job to pay that forward now, isn't it? To trans and non-binary students. And one of the reasons I feel that I can recruit and support trans and non-binary students at Queen's, particularly if they're Black, Indigenous, or other people of color, is because of the Yellow House at Queen's. The Yellow House Student Center for Equity and Inclusion launched in 2020 as Queen's newest center in the Division of Student Affairs. And like you might suspect from the name, it is a house. And like you might also expect, it is a bit yellow. It is yellowish. And it is right in the middle of campus. The Yellow House team works together with partners on and off campus, which is a wonderful part of this work, to create a comfortable and accountable space for students who identify as QTBIPoC to feel safe, create community, be empowered, and celebrate their identity and flourish. It is my pleasure to introduce Deanna Fialho and Kel Martin. Deanna Fialho is the director of the Yellow House. Deanna is passionate about developing environments where difference is cultivated into cohesion, where QTBIPoC folks have the space to share their unique talents, to empower one another, and to allow their best selves and resounding potential to emerge. Her passion for seeing uniqueness as a strength has taken her through diverse project work in public and private sectors across retail, aviation, and financial services. A high flyer. I have a particular pleasure to introduce Kel Martin, the Sexual and Gender Diversity Advisor at Yellow House. Kel supports 2S LGBTQ+ students through advising, developing and delivering programs, and working on committees and action groups to address systemic barriers at Queen's. Their work at Queen's is informed by their background in the arts and education. I'm not going to say this much, but Kel is my graduate master supervisee, and I'm so incredibly lucky that you have remained here as my colleague. And Kel also provides leadership of the local grassroots trans and gender diverse support group, Trans Family Kingston. This is going to be a fireside chat style moment that's going to begin with Kel and Dee introducing us to the Yellow House vision and programs. And then we're going to have a conversation where I ask some questions and they share with us about possibilities and challenges of intersectional student support within university structures. And we will hopefully have a bit of time for your questions as well. So with that, I invite Dee and Kel to unmute and take us away.
Thank you so much, Lee. Can you see everything okay?
Perfect.
Wonderful. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Kel. I use they or he pronouns. And as Lee mentioned, I'm the Sexual and Gender Diversity Advisor here at Yellow House. I'm joining you today from unceded Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee land with my director, Dee, who I'll let introduce herself.
Yes, thank you. So excited to be here. I'm chomping at the bit. I can't wait to get into this. So thank you for the opportunity, Lee. And as mentioned, my name is Deanna Fialho. I go by Dee. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the director at the center here.
For today, we're going to be sharing a little bit about Yellow House, Student Center for Equity and Inclusion with you through a brief presentation, followed by the fireside chat with Lee. This photo that I'm sharing with you right now is really relevant and really significant to us because it's one of the first times we opened our doors at the center, and we've had one successful brand new year of programming here at the center. So it really means a lot for us to be able to share the first time that we had opened. And I'm going to pass it over to Dee to share a bit about who we are, who we support, and what we do. And then I'll share some details after on our programming and services.
Fantastic. And throughout our chat, we're going to put a couple links in the chat for you, so you can check out our website. We could try to minimize words and focus on a couple of the most important points we want to share with you today. So as Kel mentioned, we are a student center focused on equity and inclusion. We solely focus on students, and from there, equity deserving students, specifically those who identify as QTBIPoC. As mentioned, we are the newest center in the Division of Student Affairs. We officially, which now feels like a soft launch a little bit, but we officially launched in 2020 during the pandemic. And as Kel mentioned, just this last September here, we've started our first academic year with full in-person operations. So this has really been our first year to see, what does student traffic look like? What is the uptake on our programs? What's missing? So, our whole team, we are racing to the finish line. We can't wait to get to May, June, so we can really start to look at those numbers, look at the feedback students shared with us, to curate and continuously improve our programs for next year. But just so you're aware, we are coming to you with 1 year under our belts of experience, and 2-ish prior to that, where we were mostly online. We were hybrid where we could. When we could meet in person, we did, but the majority of our programs for the first 2 years were online. To give you some context in terms of how large our team is and where we fit within the university, as mentioned, we sit within the Division of Student Affairs. We are a small but mighty team. We are four full-time continuing staff members on the team, focused on all aspects of our operations. Most importantly, really what we're fueled by are the student staff we hire throughout the year. So we're very lucky and grateful to have the opportunity to hire 15 student staff during the academic year to help facilitate our programs. And during the summer months, we hire 2 to 4 students on a full-time basis for 4 months to help us curate our programming. To really arrive at one of our most important goals is that the programs that we put out there for QT-BIPoC students are created with and for QT-BIPoC students. So that student labor and where we choose to put our budget is really important for ensuring we have the student voice alive and well in all things that we do. The next slide there is just reiterating the mandate that Lee actually read out in our introduction. Thank you for that, Lee. What I want to acknowledge here is just a couple things, again, so you understand our history, so you can really understand where we are today and where we want to go. So the mandate you see on the screen here was created almost 3 years ago through focus groups and conversations with students who identified as QT-BIPoC and who had been involved either through volunteer, unpaid, or paid positions on campus, and who were excited about contributing to what would become the mandate of the center. So the words that were chosen were words that students felt would resonate with incoming students who may not necessarily be in the know on all things social justice, but are looking to connect with the programs and initiatives that we provide. Like many of you on the line, and it was mentioned in the previous chat, we too came out as an initiative in a center. This idea was conceived through a working group and, of course, through a report that looked at the experiences of equity deserving students, specifically racially diverse students. Queer identity was also included in that. But back in 2017, a report was published that looked at those experiences and then had several action items, allocated to different areas that we could improve inside and outside of the classroom. So, back in 2017, that's how the Yellow House came to be. It was a broad idea, but we didn't have a mandate. We didn't have a team. We were really able to come in and put that together through focus groups and consultation. But we did come out of a report, which I think is an interesting way to start. There have been a lot of reports and research done in between 2017 and now, both formally and informally, that guide what we do. We wouldn't be here without folks like Jean and many others who have paved the way for us. And so, you know, I look to those reports and to those individuals with lots of joy, lots of love for whatever they're able to share, so that you know, we can learn from their hard times and just keep progressing and moving forward. The last thing I'll say is that in 2021, Queen's University did sign on to the Scarborough Charter. We are talking about intersectionality in our chat today, and I think that's important. It's for those of you who don't know, I'm not going to say too much because I want you to go look at it, look it up, just Google Scarborough Charter. You'll see many institutions have joined on to put forth efforts that will push for Black inclusion, again, in and out of the classroom within our institutions. And so we signed on to that in 2021, and that is the first time we updated our mandate to include the word flourish, which we think is quite illustrative of the lens we use of joy and thriving for the communities we serve. And so really that word is an ode to the Scarborough Charter, to which we are very committed to. Moving on to talk a little bit about who we support. So you've heard us loud and clear. You know, we are so lucky. We have the niche, not only to just solely focus on students, but specifically to focus and work with QTBIPoC student communities. I mentioned that, and I'll get into this a little bit more during the fireside chat, but you know, our team, we approach work very differently. We are very different from one another in terms of our backgrounds and approaches to work. But one of the things we do have in common is this lens of joy and thrival. So thinking about how are we creating spaces for students where they can come and be themselves and find that joy in community. It's not necessarily a place where you need to come and do social justice work. We're starting from the place where whatever you've experienced in the classroom or outside of it on campus, you know, you're coming to the Yellow House, and we are trying to curate those spaces that will bring you joy. And if that's the only joy you get through the day, then, you know, we feel we've done our job, even if it was for 5 minutes or one event that you came through for the year. And so we're quite invested in uplifting the ideas and initiatives that come directly from students. The majority of our programs and initiatives are ideas that have come up through our student staff, and then, you know, through collaboration, we built them into a reality. I do want to say that in terms of that student support, I think at all of our institutions, you know, for staff or students, in this EDII world, you know, there's a fair amount of emotional labor that, of course, goes unpaid, and a lot of folks doing this work who are not paid for it. And so, like I said earlier, we really invest a lot of our budget into student paid roles because we're putting that emphasis on you know, the thoughts and ideas of students, and we want to acknowledge them for it. So it's a really important part of who we are and who we're supporting. Moving to the next picture over here in terms of what we do, this is just really getting you ready for Kel, who's going to walk us through a couple live examples of our programs and initiatives to help bring it to life. But what you're seeing here is actually a collaboration that we had with the Faculty of Education, who have sent us amazing students through practicums who have helped us prop up different programs. Over here, we had an event to create signs where students were going to march in Kingston Pride, which was a first for some of us at Yellow House, not a first for the Faculty of Ed. But again, through that collaboration, this was an idea from lovely students in the Faculty of Ed that we benefit from, and then, you know, get a leg into the various faculties. So that collaboration, you know, really is what inspires the student opportunities for change and for new resources to come through our center. So we offer one-on-one advising, programming. All of the programs that we offer have been designed by us so far. We've definitely offered more this year than we intend to in the future years. And so, like I said, in June, July, or the summer, we'll really be looking at, you know, evaluating these programs and then picking and choosing as to what we continue with next year. what I really want to say is I think as Cal works through just some thoughts for you to think about, as they mentioned the programs, is that we try our best to respond to the needs of QTBIPoC students on the fly. And so it was mentioned in the last presentation when folks are going around and giving advice, that importance of being nimble and adapting. When you think you have a plan at the beginning of the year, we definitely thought we did, but we changed a lot throughout the year. And so just a lot of our programs have changed mid-year to address some of the real things students are thinking and feeling. The last thing I'll say before throwing it over to Kel is advice that was given to me when I first started in this role is that, you yourself, your center, the people you work with can only move at the speed of trust. And so we're sharing with you things here today that we are so proud of. But these things take time, and to build sustainability means we are only moving as fast as we can gain trust and relationships with the various student clubs and teams we work here on campus. And so we're happy to be presenting today, but look forward to coming back in future years so we can be honest about the gaps and more opportunities to grow. With that, Kel, I'll throw it over to you for some examples.
Thanks so much, Dee. So as Dee mentioned, a lot of our programs really do focus on creating a space where students can just show up, have fun, connect with the community, where there isn't an expectation to self-advocate, and where activism to engage is not a requirement. A lot of these spaces offer opportunities for students to explore and affirm identity, and our kind of joyful social events include, but are not limited to, orientation welcoming events such as our QTBIPoC cookout, movie nights, drag nights, games nights, various arts events, coffee houses, and more. We also offer programming that supports academic and career support. So we offer opportunities for students to network with alumni, staff, and faculty to really see themselves represented in professions and identify role models within the institution. We also offer inclusive study spaces. We work closely with experts on campus to tailor their workshops for QTBIPoC students. So this includes things like our QTBIPoC networking night, queer study space, a queer book club, anti-procrastination workshops, note-taking and other academic and study skill workshops, and resume and cover letter workshops designed in collaboration with various units on campus. We also offer programming that goes beyond academics and careers and focuses on just general life skills. Programs called Adulting, and it really offers an opportunity to learn valuable life skills such as cooking. So we have a Cooking with Queers program, really provides opportunities for students to work with different communities and local experts to cook and enjoy a meal together. And we're hoping to expand this program to include opportunities such as support in doing taxes, finance 101, and cosmetics workshops. We also have a lot of well-being supports. So we support student well-being informally through all of our programming, such as programs focused on physical activity and well-being that involve different accessible ways to engage in safer spaces for movement, such as we have a trans, non-binary, non-cisgender swim space, queer yoga, QTBIPoC hikes, and more. But in terms of working with health professionals on planned well-being programming, we have drop-in office hours, support groups, responsive events such as field trips, and one-on-one advising with me. This includes drop-in hours with Student Wellness Services 2S LGBTQ+ counselor. I co-facilitate a trans, non-binary, and gender diverse support group with this counselor as well, called Gender Splendor. I have supported in the planning of a 2S LGBTQ+ sharing circle with our Indigenous Student Center for directions. We also offer a weekly guided meditation and mindfulness session called Queer Your Mind, and one-on-one advising by appointment with me. Responsive programming looks like identifying student needs during all of this previously mentioned programming, and then responding to these needs. So an example of this is we noticed a trend in trans femme students really seeking support in learning about cosmetics, both through access financially, but also doing it in a safer space. So we planned a field trip where we took students who were engaged in wellbeing programming to Sephora. We worked with Sephora's manager and beauty advisors to have a private workshop at their store. And students got to learn about different cosmetics for different skin types, and they got to learn about some sort of gender affirming specific cosmetics tips and tricks. And then we also were able to also help subsidize students in purchasing their first foundation for a lot of folks. And so, sorry. In addition to this, responsive programming, we also have responsive community gatherings with various communities. In some cases, this can be positive, such as like unplanned celebrations. But in some cases, this can also be a response to creating space for communities to gather and assisting in planning events when things go wrong, such as acts of violence on campus and in the wider community and globally that occur that affect QTBIPoC student communities. We work with other units on campus and in the community to ensure these spaces have community representation and involvement in the planning and presence at the events, as well as professionals on site, such as our interfaith chaplain, 2S LGBTQ+ counselor, and more. The aforementioned advising I mentioned involves meeting one-on-one with students where I listen and support them with navigating various situations. So far, this has included navigating housing and food insecurity, interpersonal conflict, finding community, exploring identity, locating learning resources, and navigating paperwork such as name changes and much more. Advising involves being a point of contact for a student and working with various other units on campus and centers to coordinate support and resources as needed. In addition to sharing existing resources, we also make our own, such as a winter break self-care tip guide, 2S LGBTQ+ resource lists, a name change guide and FAQ, and much more. We also offer financial support in navigating barriers, such as through our gender affirming swimwear subsidy, which provides financial assistance in accessing gender affirming swimwear. I'll also quickly mention, I do also sit on committees and working groups to help address systemic changes. Previously mentioned, PAGAS is one of these groups. And just again, we'll kind of bring it back to what Dee was saying. Students are incredibly deeply involved in everything we do here at the center, both in the designing and the delivering of programs. And one thing I wanted to mention is, anybody's noticed the sharks in the background? These are called blahaj. They're a trans icon, and a student actually brought this information to us, and we were able to respond by purchasing blahajes, multiple. And so, yeah, our student staff have opportunities to present and share about the center, design and lead events, network with other students doing EDIA work, develop skills such as communication, researching, planning, organization, public speaking, and much more.
Lovely. So I just realized I mentioned we're going to put stuff in the chat, but on my screen, I'm technologically challenged. I don't see a chat. So we will share these with you after the presentation, but we do have a website that goes over all of our staff, including some of our student staff. We use Instagram as a primary way to communicate with students. So if you want to get a taste of the events that we hold and some of the initiatives we've got going on, check out our Instagram, and we'll share our emails with you through the event organizers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cal and Dee, for giving us a beautiful snapshot of Yellow House. And I have questions for you based on what you've shared and what I'm grateful to know as an insider on the Queen's campus. But I do want to encourage folks to look at the Yellow House Queens Instagram, because because Yellow House was established during the pandemic, I had so much exposure to Yellow House by Instagram, and it was beautiful. You'll see all the beautiful work that goes into representing that space. And I will tell you that when I went into Yellow House, I felt the vibe that Instagram had given me. So I felt like this is a place that feels like the way it is representing itself on Instagram. So that's not on our menu of things I'm going to ask you about, but I wanted to say this is how we communicate with students, this is how we recruit students. So having that vibe align with the way the space feels, I think is a really wonderful achievement. So I'm actually going to start with the second question that I have, not the first. I'll come back to it. And my second question was thinking a lot of what you said about the types of programming you offer, wanting to make students feel welcome who aren't necessarily in the know about the social justice. D is something that you said back there. And offering spaces where the thing happening is not activism all the time. And so I wanted to just to ask about what Yellow House offers in terms of EDI focused programming, because I think we can say that there's a lot of EDI programming for students that's popping up across in campuses generally across different kinds of units. And a lot of that's offered by university student affairs staff, so including folks who are in positions like yours. And that includes things like programming about racism, about homophobia, about transphobia. But Yellow House's programming is different from that kind of thing. And I think we see some of that in your presentation, but I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about that. Why is your programming different from that other kind of programming?
Hal, would you like to start actually, because you designed the programming, and maybe I'll speak a little bit more about the strategic, bigger picture stuff. It's your programming. You talk about it.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, so I think a big differentiation between a lot of what you see in EDI programming is that we don't focus on the learning of allies first. So we focus on QTBIPoC students feeling supported and welcomed. And then the learning comes after that, right? And it's usually within the community. So we're not engaging in any formal education, especially for like straight cis white allies. But we are engaging in solidarity building between white queers and straight cis BIPOC folks. And so that happens through a lot of the programming that we have and a lot of the shared spaces we have, and sort of naturally through a lot of conversations within our communities. And I think what makes our programming unique is that we're able to kind of fill a gap or a niche that isn't just well-being at like big W well-being programming that focuses on, you know, reactive support when students are in crisis. So I think a lot of our programming really targets proactively supporting students' well-being through building community and a sense of belonging. And also in a few other gaps I'll mention later, but that helps prevent getting to that point. So we, that's why we have such a strong focus on kind of that, you know, low stakes social events where students can connect with their community. A lot of the time, you know, I am present in some programming and it's an opportunity for students to connect informally on what's going on. And, you know, book an advising appointment and kind of chat informally, rather than a lot of students, you know, putting off going to student wellness services because there are some barriers to engaging with those resources. So it's really nice to be able to kind of be a part of the preventative side of things and to go beyond the survival, right? So we're looking at thrival through our programming, and we're able to give students the support that they need to thrive during their time at Queen's. And so, I'll leave it at that right now.
I like that because I feel like an administrator who has their heart in the right place, you might be looking for what is the EDI work happening on campus about this. They may see the makeup, the game playing, the cooking, and may wonder, is that about this? And I think what you're saying is the informality, the comfort, the student-led space. That is what is missing in many of our broader institutional sort of EDI portfolios. And Dee, I'd love to hear what you have to say about that too.
Yeah, I think, you know, and to be clear, we need those other portfolios. We rely on one another. We get the special opportunity to exist in this space where we don't have to balance the allyship piece, the advocating for why we are here, why we deserve to be here as QT/BIPOC communities, and to do that advocacy for students. We don't have to focus solely on that. We are able to get into the programming to carve out this space for joy and thrival. And so that's why I think sometimes the reaction from folks are, what is the EDI programming? Because it looks like a lot of social programming, but it's very carefully curated in terms of who we're bringing together to do what. We also often have different things happening at one time, right? So thinking about intersectionality, where Kel was mentioning some of the well-being programs we have going on. You know, if you think about traditional group counseling where folks are in a room sitting in a circle sharing, there's a lot of value to be taken to that. But we, just as a small example, will always have other activities going on in the space. So if you need to go do an art activity, play with fidgets, get some one-on-one advising on the spot. We have all of that in the space. And so I don't want to spread the message here for folks, on the line who know the everyday lived realities that this is not easy work, and the experiences of the students we serve, it's not all joy and it's not all thriving. We know that. But what we want to be clear with is, because of where we're situated in the institution, and we have peers who focus solely on allyship and educating for allyship, it allows us this space.
Nice.
The other piece I just wanted to mention quickly is that when the Yellow House came to be, the first 2 or 3 people that were here designing the programs, putting the mandate together, going through those steps, it just so happened that none of us were from post-secondary. We all had experience in EDII, but none of us had had a stint in student affairs. We definitely were not your prototypical student affairs resumes or applications coming in. And I'm sharing that because I think leaders here really took a chance, not only in putting this program together, but they took a chance on us and in doing something different. So we all started coming from perspectives that were outside of post-secondary. But the next thing I want to say is what they also did is set us up with folks who do have the institutional experience to help us navigate those political challenges sometimes, right? To use the right words, to translate what our ideas are in good faith in words that others across, the division will understand. So they've really been that conduit, and you can't have one without the other, right? You can't just dump a bunch of folks who've done EDI work. I don't think you can into a center like this. It wouldn't be safe to do that, right? But I think that's a big part of the reason why we have that creative freedom, because we know we're approaching this work differently, but we are well supported by others who have more experience than we do.
Thank you so much, Dee. And I really appreciate hearing from you both about how there's kind of 2 sides to the work of supporting underrepresented QTBIPoC students on campus. There's the allyship educational work, then there's the actual space for us, for the us's and the things that are not about that allyship. And I do encourage our folks with us today to think about whether both of those sides of that coin are being equally, similarly funded, organized, and institutionally supported where you practice. So speaking of that, I think we can say that today in 2023, many Canadian universities, if not most, are realizing that specific dedicated staff roles are required to support particular groups of equity deserving students. So we cannot have the one EDI person doing all the things, right? We're realizing there's specific community-focused knowledge and experience that's required. We need people with dedicated portfolios to particular equity deserving groups. But I think we can also generalize that those roles tend to be that person who's within the general student affairs office or structure or general counseling structure or a particular faculty or other unit. So they're that person who's in an otherwise general all-purpose university space. And Yellow House is different because you are a standalone unit. So you have 4 full-time staff who have those specialized portfolios for different equity deserving groups who work together through an intersectional lens, but you are not housed in another thing. Yellow House is its own thing. And I wonder if you can tell our folks with us today about how that Yellow House, we are our own thing, how that structure impacts or supports the work that you try to do.
Yeah, certainly. I think I can get us started with the points we thought about, Kel, around psychological safety, and then I'll throw it over to you for the more tangible examples that you had reflected on. And so when I say psychological safety, just to use simple words, I feel actually safer and more accountable to the work that I do because I'm working in an environment, and I'm lucky to do so, where all of the folks in this space that we are hired to work together, we embody the lived experiences of the students that we serve. And so to get a job at the Yellow House, you need skills and experience, right? Have you done this work before? What's your knowledge base? Where have you done this work before? Of course, we're looking at resumes like that, right? But we also have the power, and it is powerful, of lived experience, right? And we've arrived at this place where we're further down the line in knowing who we are, how we are connected to our work, and that does benefit students who are earlier along in their journeys. And maybe I'm being biased, but I'll say when I was in my early 20s, I did not know who I was. That came much later. And so I try to have that lens when students are sitting in front of us and engaging, that how can I use my age and experience and this privilege to benefit them? And so what I'll say is, when I come to work every day, it's not that I work with people who think the same or do things in the same way, because we certainly do not. I think each of us can attest to how different we are. But what we have, the commonality we have, is the power of that lived experience. We have skills and expertise that contribute to our overall mandate of making and creating safe spaces that are safer and more accountable. And so I'm just saying that as from a more HR perspective, when I came to Queens and I thought about building the team that we now have, I really put a lot of emphasis on that, because in previous roles, I came from the corporate world where every day I felt like I was advocating for myself to just be in that chair, visually, the woman, the person that I am in front of you, and the things that I wanted to get done. You know, I had larger budgets in the corporate world and I enjoyed them. I will say that. But what I have here in post-secondary, and truly with my team, is the safety and space to try new things. And they don't all work all the time. But because of the team we've created, and because of this niche that we're able to exist within, it allows us the safety to take chances and to inspire that energy upwards. And so, Cal, I'll throw it over to you for some more of the tangible examples.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Yeah, I think the two main things that I want to touch on are the power that a center, a unit like this has within the institution, and also the consistent space being an impact. So with regards to the power, we work incredibly closely with students. I can't say it enough. So we're very like boots on the ground. Like, we know what is happening. We are hearing from students constantly. We know what needs to be advocated for. We also have the time, energy, and expertise to advocate for it. So as a unit, we're not just coming across as one EDI person who is, constantly the bug in the ear. We are a powerful unit. We're a center. And so when things need to get done, we have the power to advocate for students. And it's really quite magical to be in a center where we actually have the teeth to do that. And we've had some great examples of some really incredible advancements that have happened as a result of the power that the center has. So I think that's a pretty big one. And then also the consistent space. So I think for students, knowing that there is a place that they can come to, during office hours, like when we're open, but that there is a consistent, permanent space on campus that exists for them, I think means a lot. And, if you think about our programming, we do a lot of it here at the Yellow House, but we also do a lot of it with all across campus with all different campus partners. And, sometimes the spaces that we're carving out for that programming at specific times is fantastic. And the community that comes out is great and students have a great time. But outside of those hours, students won't engage with those resources or those spaces. And so for them to have the Yellow House and to know that there is a space they can come to anytime, I think is quite meaningful. And even if they're not accessing it, the knowledge that it exists, and that they can come in and book advising appointments and there's a friendly face here to greet them, I think is really impactful.
Nice. And there's food all the time, and there's a coffee and a tea bar, and there are couches, and there's a kitchen that students can use. I think that's so critical about, it's a space, it's not an event. We can event ourselves into the sunset, but that's so different from a person. It's such a different kind of barrier to going to an event as going to a space where all you're doing is going and getting a granola bar and a cup of tea, and then here's all these people who are there and chill and welcoming and greeting you for the person you are. So I think that's another wonderful takeaway from the Yellow House experience, and some of the successes you've had is the space not the event as the organizing principle of the intersectional work you're doing. So I love the Yellow House, and I know you're doing amazing things. And I also think it's important and real to talk about some of the challenges of creating and sustaining an explicitly intersectional student service center like the Yellow House. So let's talk about if you'd like to share some of the challenges of doing this work through intersectional lens with our folks today. And my partner's yelling at my cat in the background, so you may hear a bit of that. I'm just going to mute and invite whoever to speak to the challenges. Pandemic flashbacks.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So I think one of the challenges from a programming perspective has been, I mean, we are a brand new center. We've just finished our first year of in-person programming. And so we have a lot to learn. We're going to be spending the summer doing a lot of evaluation assessment. But I think one of the things that we started with programming wise was very broadly supporting 2S LGBTQ+ students. And so as we move forward and as the center grows, our ability to do this work even better also grows. And so we're hoping to offer more opportunities for specific intersectional identities and communities within the 2S LGBTQ+ community. We have a few of them right now, but I'm hoping to expand on that. And also thinking a little bit about kind of queer coding. Our center serves, straight BIPoC students as well. And so the queer coding, presents a little bit of a challenge sometimes for students to engage who are, not queer, or maybe they're stealth or they're not out. And whatever the reason, are not comfortable with walking into a queer coded space. So as we expand the center, we're hoping to also offer non-queer coded spaces in addition to our existing queer coded spaces.
Interesting.
And I'll just add two things onto that, Lee, if we have time.
We do, please.
Great. So the first I'll start off with is more so from the student perspective. And so as a center for us, we've noted several times the emphasis we put on working with students, right? And there are all the pros to that will never stop. One of the opportunities that comes up is that there's turnover, right? So if you think about student clubs, every year or so, the leadership and the contingent is changing, as well as for the number and the growing number of paid student roles through student government. There are many equity-based roles, and there are new ones that seem to be added as the years go on. And again, it's a new student every time in a role that existed or that is new, that they're trying to figure out what to do with that role. And so how the ripple effect that has on us is that it really is up to us as a center to try to stay consistent on our mandate. To try to be clear on the importance of intersectionality. When I talk about the Scarborough Charter, for example, to an average student, average meaning, where is your time spent? You're learning, you're working, you're engaging. You may not have read the Scarborough Charter, and that's okay. That's our job, right? And so how are we choosing the few but specific things that we want to guide students in trying to stay consistent in a world where things are ever changing and they need to? And so one of the ways that we've gone about this is to try to really meet the student where they're at, right? So if this is a brand new role and they have no institutional memory in terms of what was done prior, then that's where we're coming into play, where it's been 3 years now. We can speak to the things that, have gone on campus and help guide that student, because not all students come to the table with a specific list of goals, especially at the beginning of their contracts that only last, for some of them 8 months. And so, just really, really noting how nimble you have to be, because each student and each platform will be different when they're voted in or when they get these positions. And so really just going back to that mandate and propping intersectionality up with many reminders is an important thing. The last thing I'll say is just around resources. I think this is not going to be a surprise to anyone, right? On the line Okay, resources, we talked about it in the last, event as well. This is a reality for everyone. We know where the economy is as well. So, things may not necessarily be getting easier. They may stay the way they are, or worse, depending on where you're working. And so for us, really having that lens on, equity versus equality, and the fact that, yes, we have people on the team like Kel who are building programs for queer and trans students. We also have folks on the team building programming for racialized students. We need more. We need roles that are focused on Black inclusion specifically, so that there can be some sustainability in our engagement with Black students who shockingly could also be trans or queer because of intersectionality, right? And so I'm just saying, we're not going to get all of the tools and resources we want on the spot. And we certainly don't have those. We're only 3 years in, but continuing to advocate and to remember that we cannot just reproduce all of the programs we have for queer trans students for racialized students or vice versa. We are not always going to have a holistic set of offerings for all of the students that we are seeking to attract. But each year we will choose to focus on communities, to advocate for more resources, so that over time we are building what will become a holistic and sustainable group of offerings.
Wonderful. Well, we are at our time, but I just want to, on behalf of the Thriving on Campus series, want to thank Kel and Dee, not only for sharing with us your time today and your expertise and this experience of providing to us LGBTQ+ supports the intersectional lens of QTBIPoC students in mind, but for also making this campus a place that will be a place people actually can be in a good way. I'm very grateful to have you as my colleagues. So please follow them on Instagram. It's a beautiful Instagram feed. It feels like the space itself. And I hope you too, if you can, stick around for the rest of the day and be with us and share more. And with that, I send it back to my colleague, Michael.